Oh my God, what kind of mother-in-law shows up in a cheap, ragged dress? Even the dead would feel ashamed. That was how Jasmine, my daughter-in-law, spat her words straight into my face, right there in the middle of my husband's funeral. And the moment she pointed at me, laughing at every stitch on my dress, I saw Grace, the mysterious woman, standing at the back of the church, tighten her grip around a familiar token. Something that if Jasmine ever saw it would destroy her entire life in exactly 3 seconds. But just a few seconds later, the balance shifted because the poor, pathetic widow Jasmine thought I was actually the owner of the entire fashion empire she worked for. If you were me, would you stay silent and take the humiliation, or stand up and crush the abuser with the truth? Comment below what you would choose, and don't forget to follow so you won't miss the next part. I am Evelyn Carter, 67 years old, a dark-skinned African-American woman. After 42 years of marriage, I lost the only man who ever walked beside me, Jonathan. He left this world gently, but I didn't. The pain in my chest felt sharp enough to tear through flesh. I thought I had prepared myself for this moment, but when the church doors opened and his casket was carried down the aisle, I realized I had been lying to myself all along. No one can stay composed while saying goodbye to the person they loved most. I stood before the casket, my hands clasped tightly as I tried to hold myself together. The murmured condolences around me, the quiet sobs falling like bitter drops on the cold stone floor, the dim golden light, and the faint scent of incense drifting through the chapel, all wrapped around me like a heavy shroud. I wanted just one peaceful moment to whisper my final farewell to the man who had shared my life. But that peace did not last. A shrill voice sliced through the weight of the room. Jasmine, my daughter-in-law. Every word she spat out felt like a blade driven into my back with deliberate cruelty. God, you really wore that cheap thing to your husband's funeral. You're embarrassing the whole family. Her voice echoed against the stone walls, making several people turn in shock. I froze as if someone had squeezed my heart in their fist. For a split second, I thought I misheard her. But Jasmine stood there, arms crossed, her eyes scanning me as if I were a defective item on a bargain shelf. There was no sympathy in her expression, no respect for the dead, only raw, violent contempt. The entire chapel seemed to turn to stone. Dozens of curious, startled, and ashamed eyes fixed on me. My cheeks burned, not from embarrassment, but from the deep, stinging sense of betrayal. Jasmine didn't just humiliate me, she stained the sacred moment of saying goodbye to Jonathan. I stared down at my hands, trying to steady my breath, though my chest felt like it was being torn open. I said nothing. I didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't cry. I inhaled slowly. My silence only fed Jasmine's arrogance. She glanced at her friends, lips curling, as if she had just won a petty battle. The cruelty in her face chilled the air around us. While Jasmine continued ranting, her voice fading into a dull roar in my ears, something else caught my attention. A slight movement at the back of the chapel. A woman stood leaning against one of the stone columns, half in shadow and half in the soft light. She didn't look startled or uncomfortable like the others. Instead, she watched me closely, her eyes deep and sharp, as if she understood far more than she should. As if she was studying me, evaluating me, waiting to see what I would do. Her gaze made me pause. Something about it felt familiar, not in appearance, but in sensation. This woman I didn't know carried an awareness that reached deeper than the surface of the moment. I wasn't in the state to decipher it, but her presence pushed Jasmine's voice into the background, as though the room itself shifted around that silent figure. My heart was trapped between two wounds. One was the grief of losing my husband. The other was the humiliation my daughter-in-law flung at me, a humiliation meant to push me out of my own family. And yet, at the far end of the chapel, that mysterious woman stood watching. Not with pity, with something else entirely. It felt like she saw a truth buried inside me, a truth even I had hidden too long. I didn't understand why she watched me like that, why in a room full of people, her eyes never left me. And I wondered whether her presence at the funeral was a coincidence or the beginning of something larger, something sharper, deeper, and far more dangerous than Jasmine's insult. The church was still soaked in grief, yet every word that came out of Jasmine's mouth twisted that silence into an invisible scream. I stood before Jonathan's casket, my heart still split open from losing my husband, and my daughter-in-law chose this moment to unveil her true nature. The pain inside me felt warped, turned into a stage for her cruelty. Everything happened so fast, my breath couldn't keep up with the chaos spreading across the room. Jasmine stepped forward slightly, her eyes sweeping over me as if I were some unnecessary object in the funeral of the man both of us were bound to. A thin sneer curled on her lips before she turned to Aaron, my only son. "Aaron, give your mother some money. Look at her. She looks pathetic, like she can't afford anything." Her voice was so sharp, it felt like it sliced the air itself. Aaron didn't look at me. My own son, the boy I once held through fevered nights, the person Jonathan taught to be kind and respectful, lowered his head before the venomous words of his wife. His face darkened, avoiding my gaze, as though I were a burden, a shame he wanted hidden beneath the rug of a supposedly perfect family. It felt like someone dragged a freezing blade across my skin. It wasn't because Jasmine called me poor. I had worn the mask of a modest woman for years. It was Aaron's silence, his quiet agreement with her insult, that cut deeper than anything Jasmine could have said. That silence hurt more than 100 cruel words. Jasmine went on, each line tearing open the wound in my chest. "At least buy something decent to wear. People might think Aaron abandoned you. It's embarrassing." A few guests turned away, unwilling to witness the spectacle. Jasmine's viciousness didn't just stab into me. It polluted the sacred space meant for Jonathan's farewell. I wanted to say something, but my throat closed as if I had swallowed stone. The sight of Jonathan lying there unmoving pushed me to swallow my pain instead. If he were still alive, he would want me to stand with dignity. I tightened my chest, trying to keep myself from falling apart. But under the surface of my silence, everything inside me braced for a storm I knew was coming. Then Jasmine launched another arrow. If it were my mother, I'd never let her show up looking this awful in public. She insulted not only me, but the woman who raised her. Yet Jasmine seemed unaware of the cruelty in her words. Or perhaps she knew and simply didn't care. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, clinging to the image of Jonathan. I wanted his memory to overshadow the humiliation Jasmine had thrown at me. But she dragged my grief down to the ground, trampling on it as if it were nothing more than dirt under her heels. And just when I felt myself teetering on the edge of collapse, I sensed that stare again. At the far end of the chapel, the mysterious woman still stood there, belonging to no group, saying nothing, expressing neither sympathy nor judgment. She watched me as if looking directly into the hollow behind my ribs where pain pulsed in waves. Her gaze sent a chill down my spine. Earlier, I thought her staring was accidental, but now with Jasmine's venom filling the room, the woman's eyes felt like a sign, a warning, or perhaps a deeper understanding I wasn't ready to decipher. She didn't blink when Jasmine hurled those words at me, as if she had anticipated all of this. I looked at her longer this time, and in that exact moment, she tilted her head so subtly one might miss it. A tilt that seemed to say she understood, or worse, that she knew something I had buried for years. There was something in her eyes that made my skin tighten, as if she were seeing straight through the wall I had built around my true life. I turned back to Jasmine, still busy tearing me apart, without realizing that my silence was not weakness. I recorded every word, every gesture, every slice of contempt she threw. Because I knew Jasmine's life was about to turn in a direction she could never imagine. I left the church with frozen hands and a hollow carved deep inside my chest. The shame Jasmine poured over me still clung to my skin, but beneath that humiliation ran another current, slower and far deeper. I drove back to the small apartment I had deliberately kept for years, letting everyone believe I was a modest widow living on what little I had. 20 minutes later, when the door shut behind me, it felt as if the entire world outside had been locked out, leaving only the truth waiting to rise within these walls. I walked through the dim living room, past the cheap furniture I bought only to reinforce my disguise. Each step brought me closer to the wall at the end of the hallway, the one hiding the secret I had guarded for decades. The pain from the funeral still pulsed in my chest, but the truth behind that wall flared like a spark, reigniting my strength. I placed my hand on the section of wall that looked like plaster and brick to anyone else, but was a real door to me. A soft sound echoed as I slid it aside. The panel parted to reveal a wide room that lit up automatically. Light poured down on shelves of files arranged by year, by location, by project. On the table, the first sketches I ever drew were preserved under glass. In the center stood 3 large wooden cabinets, each carved with the Carter Atelier logo, the name that had lifted me to the top of the fashion world without my family ever knowing. I stared at the binders documenting 14 boutiques, 2 manufacturing plants, and 1 brand widely recognized as one of the most prestigious empires on the East Coast. I wasn't the poor, pitiful woman Jasmine painted me to be. I was the owner of everything she could never even dream of touching. But I had never told Aaron. I wanted my son to grow up without wealth swallowing his character. Yet when Jasmine entered his life, I began to see that keeping the truth hidden for too long may have been a mistake. I walked to the glass cabinet beside my desk. Inside hung the black dress I wore to the funeral. Not the outdated piece Jasmine mocked, but a limited edition couture design I created 3 years ago. It cost $58,000, not including the hand-sewn lace. My fingers brushed the stitching, each thread representing dozens of hours from the artisans Jasmine proudly claimed to represent at the boutique. I let out a bitter, stinging laugh. The thing you call cheap, Jasmine, is an entire month of your salary. My voice echoed quietly in the steel gleaming room. The pain her words had inflicted shifted into something else, something sharper. I never sought revenge, but I would not let anyone trample over me on the day I buried my husband. I placed the dress back into the cabinet and moved toward the long table lined with employee files. Each box was labeled, containing the details of every worker under my system. I lifted the one that read Downtown Boutique, the branch where Jasmine worked. Her file lay on top, marked in red as a high-risk employee. I had seen her name before, but never thought I'd need to act on it. She was a minor issue with small violations, and I never allowed personal life to affect business. But today, she pushed me far beyond my limits. I closed the file and walked to the black landline phone placed in the corner. It was the one I used only for the most confidential matters, a private line known to only a handful of my most trusted people. I lifted the receiver, heard the faint hiss of static, and dialed the number etched into my memory for over 30 years. The phone rang 3 times before a deep, familiar voice answered. I spoke softly, Grace. It's time. There was a pause, the kind of silence weighted with understanding from someone who grasped exactly what those 3 words meant. No explanation needed, no elaboration. Grace was the only person I trusted to handle what I could not. Her voice was steady when she replied, I understand. I'll come. I set the phone down, feeling a small part of the heaviness lift, though many questions still churned beneath my ribs. The last time I called Grace for something this serious had been years ago. What I asked of her today would undoubtedly shift the balance inside my family. I leaned against the table, staring at the open doorway of my secret room. Outside lay the life I constructed as an empty shell, and here was the power I concealed to protect my family's peace. But that peace had already shattered, thanks to Jasmine. I glanced back at the phone, remembering the eyes of the mysterious woman in the church, the way she looked at me as if she knew something no one else could see. Was she connected to Grace or to a part of my past I wasn't ready to uncover? When I set the phone down, a brief easing settled in my chest. I knew Grace Donovan would never show up empty-handed. She was the woman I trusted most throughout the entire creation of Carter Atelier, and if I said, it's time, Grace understood it was no trivial matter. What she witnessed at the church, Jasmine humiliating me, was only the surface. The deeper layers Grace had known for a long time. I sat in the large chair inside the hidden room, my eyes drifting up toward the shelves packed with the achievements of my lifetime. I didn't hate Jasmine, but I couldn't let her insolence and cruelty wreak havoc on my family any longer. Jonathan once told me, power only matters when used at the right moment, and today I needed it to protect myself. My phone chimed. I opened it. Grace had sent an audio file with the message, "You need to hear this." I pressed play. Jasmine's voice filled the room, sharp and venomous, exactly as it was when she stood before me. Look at that old woman. She probably can't even afford a scarf. A mocking laugh followed along with the sound of her heels brushing past an elderly customer. The woman shrank back, murmured something softly, and Jasmine snapped at her with crude irritation. I placed the phone down, feeling as though someone twisted a steel nail into my chest. Jasmine hadn't just humiliated me at the funeral. She carried that same maliciousness into her workplace, wounding strangers who had never harmed her. I closed my eyes for a moment. Insults directed at me could be ignored, but cruelty toward the vulnerable could not. Another message arrived. This is only one part. I have worse evidence. I believed her. Grace never spoke without certainty. She was the kind of woman who could see through the masks people wore, and Jasmine was merely one of many she had dealt with. But this time, Jasmine crossed a sacred line for me, the dignity of a grieving wife. Grace asked to meet me at the executive office that evening. By the time I arrived, the sky had deepened into shades of twilight purple. Carter Atelier's headquarters rose tall and cold, like pillars of light in the city. I rarely came here, preferring to keep my identity separate from the brand and remain behind the scenes. But tonight, walking through the long hallway, I felt something old and powerful stirring back to life. Grace waited outside the conference room. Her hair was neatly tied back, her eyes sharp like polished steel. She had the demeanor of someone who had witnessed the world turning far too many times to be shaken by anything. She looked at me without pity, without fuss, only complete respect. "Evelyn, I reviewed every camera from the past 2 weeks," she said in a steady voice. Jasmine wasn't just rude to you, she was cruel to customers. She placed a tablet on the table. A video played. Jasmine stood behind the boutique counter, phone in hand, lips painted boldly. Her voice icy. "You can't afford that. Try another store," she said to a woman searching for a birthday gift for her granddaughter. Jasmine's eyes swept down the woman's simple clothes as though she were beneath her. My chest tightened again. There were things worse than Jasmine humiliating me. Using her position to intimidate others, boosting her own ego by crushing people beneath her, that was something I could not ignore. Grace switched to the next video. Jasmine said to a young coworker, "I'm getting promoted soon. Management trusts me completely." Her tone was dripping with arrogance, spoken loudly while a customer waited unattended. Grace let out a cold, short laugh. "Confidence built on delusion," she said. "She thinks promotions come from sweet talk. She has no idea we evaluate people by their behavior, not their stories." I stared at Jasmine's face on the screen, the face my son once insisted was kind, ambitious, capable. But all I saw now was entitlement, a woman who believed she had the right to judge anyone. Someone who did not respect others had no place in my home, let alone as Aaron's wife. Grace stopped the video and looked directly at me. "I'll prepare a full report, but before I do, tell me, how far do you want Jasmine to face the consequences?" I drew a slow breath. Not the breath of anger, but the breath of someone who had lost something priceless and refused to let that pain become someone else's entertainment. There was no space left in me for softness. Jasmine had sown something dark, and she would reap exactly what she planted. I want to see her reveal her true nature again. And that would be the first step toward dismantling Jasmine's arrogance. I left Grace's office with a clarity sharper than anything I'd felt in months. If Jasmine dared humiliate me at Jonathan's funeral, then I needed to see with my own eyes how she behaved towards someone she believed powerless, poor, and insignificant. I had lived quietly for years to protect my family's peace, but Jasmine had shattered that peace in one afternoon. Now I needed to witness her true face in the place where she felt invincible. The next day, I stood in front of the boutique where Jasmine worked. The glass door reflected my figure in the deliberately worn-out clothes I chose for this visit. It wasn't a cruel performance, just a test to see who treated others with dignity when they thought no one was watching. People like Jasmine never understood that dignity comes from the heart, not from a bank account. I pushed the door open. A soft bell rang, followed by Jasmine's sharp gaze sweeping from my shoes to my hair. She narrowed her eyes, her lips curved with annoyance as she jerked her chin toward the back of the store. "Sales section is in the back," she said. "We don't sell what you're looking for up here." I didn't even get a chance to respond before she turned her back as if my presence contaminated the air around her. A young employee nearby gave me an uneasy glance but didn't intervene. Jasmine was the senior in this shift, and clearly she'd made the store revolve around her rules. I walked slowly between the racks, playing the part of a customer who wasn't sure she belonged. Jasmine shot another glance at me, her voice cutting through the music softly playing overhead. "If you're looking for a birthday gift or something, you should try the stores down the street. This place's prices are for you." The air tightened. A few customers looked over, unsure whether to pretend they hadn't heard. Jasmine stepped closer, her smile twisting. "Your daughter-in-law works here. Poor girl, she must struggle maintaining your disaster of a fashion sense." She said it with such polished cruelty that even the young employee flinched. I lowered my head, letting my posture sag, playing the part of someone embarrassed and wounded. Jasmine, satisfied with that reaction, seemed to grow taller. She clicked her tongue. "Don't stand here. These are the new collections, very expensive. If you scratch anything, it'll be a problem. Go to the back, find something more your level." That was when I lifted my eyes toward the security camera above us. Just a brief glance, but precise enough to signal Grace that everything was unfolding exactly as planned. She was surely in the monitoring room behind the boutique, watching Jasmine's behavior in real time. I took a few items from the racks, pretending to hesitate. Jasmine folded her arms, watching me with a superiority she had never earned. Every word she spoke was being recorded. Her disdain, her insults, her judgments of customers based on outfits and posture. No manager could ignore such evidence. Another older woman entered, and for half a second, Jasmine's face changed, but she quickly snapped back to her usual hostility. "Do you need something? Don't stand so close to the merchandise. I can tell you're not buying anything." The woman froze. Her eyes darted toward me, looking for a sign that she wasn't alone in this humiliation. I gave her a small, sad smile, as if this was something I had long learned to endure. It wasn't real, but Jasmine believed it wholeheartedly. I lifted a silk scarf and held it carefully. "Do you think I could afford this?" My voice quivered just enough to sound unsure. Jasmine laughed. "That scarf? You can't afford it. Don't embarrass yourself." Her voice rose just enough for customers to hear. A few eyebrows lifted. A couple of people frowned. But Jasmine kept going, oblivious to the storm she was summoning. I studied her face for a long second, memorizing every smirk, every flicker of disdain. Then I slowly lifted my gaze to the camera again. This time, there was no fear, no meekness, only a message. I am ready. A door at the back of the boutique shifted open, soft, subtle, but meaningful. Jasmine didn't notice, but I did. And I felt the entire boutique exhale, as if bracing for a truth that had been waiting too long to surface. It was time. Now, I whispered to myself, it's time to reveal who I am. The air inside the boutique felt frozen in place. I stood among the polished racks, still holding the silk scarf Jasmine claimed I could never afford. She was busy staring at her phone, smiling smugly after her last insult. I sensed the tension thickening around us, like the entire boutique was holding its breath before breaking open. The back door of the boutique creaked. A figure emerged, walking with slow, deliberate steps that sounded like a gavel striking marble. Grace Donovan. The lights glinted across her tailored suit, carrying the presence of a woman who commanded dozens of branches and shaped every major decision at Carter Atelier. Jasmine looked up frowning, assuming she was just another demanding customer. Grace didn't look at anyone else. Her eyes met mine with a calm sharpness that held years of understanding. She took 2 more steps and faced Jasmine directly. "Jasmine, take Mrs. Carter to the VIP room." I saw Jasmine flinch, then burst into a harsh laugh that bounced off the boutique walls. "VIP, Her Grace, you must be joking." She lifted her chin, eyebrows raised with arrogance. "The VIP room is for important clients." And she, Jasmine, glanced at me, dripping contempt. She came for the clearance section. A young employee nearby swallowed hard, torn between stepping in and staying silent. Jasmine's confidence swelled, still unaware that every word she said was tightening her own noose. Grace watched her for a beat, then delivered the line that would split Jasmine's life into before and after. Her voice remained steady, yet the words fell like thunder. "Yes, Jasmine, she's a VIP." Grace paused just long enough for the tension to magnify. "She's also the owner of this brand." The boutique erupted in a stunning silence. A customer gasped softly. Another employee clasped a hand over her mouth. Jasmine stood frozen, her face turning pale as if she'd been slapped in front of everyone. She blinked rapidly, her mouth opening but producing no sound. The arrogance on her face cracked apart, revealing shock, fear, and humiliation. I stepped forward, not rushing, not trembling, but with the composure of someone finally rising above the dirt they were pushed into. "How interesting," I said, my voice carrying through the boutique, "the way you treat someone when you think they are a nobody." Jasmine's eyes shook. She backed up instinctively, gripping the counter as though it could save her. You, what are you talking about?" Her voice splintered. Grace continued, her tone sharp as a polished blade. "Let me be clear, Jasmine. This is Evelyn Carter, the founder of Carter Atelier, the president of the entire system you work for." A whisper ran through the room. Someone exhaled shakily. Jasmine stared at me as if she could force reality to bend, but the truth hit her harder each passing second. All the words she had thrown at me echoed back at her. "She can't afford this, not her level, looks too poor, clearance section." Now they twisted around her throat like a rope tightening with every breath. I looked straight into her eyes. The timid look I wore earlier was gone. "You said many things to me today," I said. "But the saddest part is that I gave you a chance to show kindness and you refused it." Jasmine shook her head, fighting the truth, but her body trembled with a helplessness she couldn't mask anymore. Grace stood beside me, arms lightly crossed, offering no mercy through silence. Her presence alone confirmed to everyone that this was real, final, and irreversible. A young employee approached hesitantly, her gaze toward me filled with newfound respect. I didn't look her way. My focus was entirely on Jasmine. I stepped close enough that she would hear each word clearly. Now it's time to peel off every mask Jasmine has been hiding behind. The tension in the boutique after that reveal was already as tight as a rope about to snap, but it was only the opening act. I needed Jasmine to face every truth without escape, without denial. Grace signaled for all employees to gather in the main meeting room at the back of the store. A few customers still lingered near the counter, shocked to realize that the woman they watched being insulted minutes earlier was actually the founder herself. I followed Grace while Jasmine was escorted in like someone who had just committed an unforgivable act. The meeting room door closed. Employees stood in two lines, their faces a mix of respect, disbelief, and curiosity. Jasmine sat at the center of the long table, her face pale, hands gripping each other until her knuckles turned white. I stood at the end of the table, calm like a silent witness, though every pair of eyes remained fixed on me. No one spoke until Grace dropped a thick folder onto the table. The sound of that folder hitting wood echoed like a final verdict. Grace opened the first page. "Now," she said, "we will review the conduct of employee Jasmine Morris over the past 3 months, supported by evidence from our system." Her voice was steady, cool, leaving no room for excuses. Jasmine inhaled sharply. "Grace, if there's been a misunderstanding, Grace raised a hand, cutting her off. "We don't rely on emotion, Jasmine. We rely on data, security footage reports, and customer feedback." She turned the first page. Issue 114, late arrivals in 3 months. Grace read each word clearly. No notice, no permission, no explanation. One employee beside Jasmine quietly brought a hand to her mouth. Jasmine trembled. I was stuck in traffic." Grace placed the paper down. 14 traffic jams all on your shifts? I'll note your excuse, but the data says otherwise." She flipped to the next report, Issue 2, insulting elderly customers. A video played on the screen behind us. Jasmine appeared, saying, "You can't afford this. Go to another store." Her voice filled the room like a cold blade. The room stiffened. Grace shut off the video. "I have 7 more if needed." Jasmine held her head shaking. I was joking." "Jokes that target the vulnerable?" Grace asked, her voice low but piercing. She turned another page. Issue 3, using your phone during work for an average of 2 hours per shift. We even have footage of customers waiting 7 minutes while you finished a call. Jasmine swallowed hard as her world crumbled in front of her. Grace moved on. Issue 4, $68,000 in personal debt. Normally, the company does not intervene in employees' finances, but you used your job here as collateral to secure a loan. Jasmine's head jerked up. I didn't use the company," as Grace slid a document toward her. "This is your signed loan agreement. You wrote, 'Currently being considered for managerial promotion by boutique director.'" Her tone sharpened. "This is entirely false." Jasmine sagged back into her chair, eyes wide with dread. And then Grace opened the final page. Issue 5, lying about a promotion to borrow money to impress coworkers and to manipulate customers. Grace's voice dropped even lower. "A truthful employee does not fabricate authority." Jasmine collapsed inward, her face buried in her hands. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were." I stepped forward. "That is the problem, Jasmine." The room went silent. My voice filled the space, slow and sharp like closing steel doors. "You are only kind to the rich." Jasmine looked up, eyes bloodshot with desperation. I didn't mean to. I didn't think." "You thought I was poor," I said. "So you believed you had the right to step on me. You thought elderly customers couldn't buy anything, so you treated them like they were beneath you. You believed younger employees should fear you, so you could behave like a tyrant." Each sentence stripped another layer off the mask she had worn. Grace opened a drawer, took out a pen, and set it directly on the termination papers. A simple gesture, yet heavy enough to crush the air from the room. Everyone stopped breathing. Jasmine jolted upright like someone drowning. "Grace, please don't. I still have debts. I still have the house. I still have Aaron." I looked straight into Jasmine's desperate face. None of those things were reasons to mistreat others. Jasmine trembled violently, gripping the table edge, breath unsteady. Grace lowered the pen onto the termination line. And that was the moment everything stopped. The pen rested on the termination form. The meeting room was still heavy with silence after Grace pressed her signature onto the termination form. That silence felt like an invisible blade splitting Jasmine's life into a before and after. No one in the room had any sympathy left. They had all witnessed how she belittled others to lift herself up, and now the shattered mirror was showing her the exact reflection she had created. Jasmine trembled where she sat, eyes wide, lips shaking, as if begging for mercy but unable to form a sound. Then Grace finished the signature. A clean stroke, a soft scrape of pen on paper. Jasmine collapsed into her chair as if her spine had dissolved. She covered her face with both hands, her breath breaking into small, jerky sobs that no one stepped forward to comfort. The employees kept their distance, horrified by the truth, but also strangely relieved to see justice finally delivered. The moment Grace closed the file, 2 security guards appeared at the door, polite yet firm in their posture. There was no mistaking why they were here. "Miss Jasmine, please come with us," one said. The word please sounded soft, but left no room for refusal. Jasmine stood abruptly. I haven't grabbed my bag." Her voice cracked, her hands trembling so violently she couldn't pick up her purse. One guard picked it up and placed it into her hands, like returning the last things she still owned. As she was escorted out, not a single employee met her eyes. They lowered their heads, shuffled papers, pretended to be occupied. In retail, the respect of coworkers mattered more than bonuses, and Jasmine had just lost that permanently. The door shut behind her, sealing away her old life. I remained by the table, feeling not triumph, but clarity. I had not created the person Jasmine became. I had only pulled the curtain back so everyone could see her for who she was. When I stepped back out into the boutique, I saw Aaron standing by the entrance. My son's face was pale, his expression a storm of disbelief, hurt, and confusion. He looked at me as though seeing a stranger, yet searching for pieces of the mother he once knew. "Mom," Aaron said, voice raspy, "you're really the owner of Carter Atelier? You hid this from me?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. And Jasmine, she actually did those things. I stood still, meeting my son's eyes. No anger, no harshness, just the heaviness of a mother who had lost her husband and been wounded by her daughter-in-law. "The truth doesn't need me to explain it," I said quietly. "You saw it yourself." Aaron turned his head away, breathing unevenly. The memories he had of Jasmine, her sweetness, her tears, her carefully crafted vulnerability were shattering inside him. Every gesture she used to manipulate him dissolved like dust in sunlight. Then Jasmine appeared in the doorway, her face blotched red, her eyes swollen, her steps unsteady, as though she could barely hold herself upright. She looked at Aaron, then at me, then at Grace standing beside me like a fortress. "Evelyn." Jasmine's voice cracked. She took a desperate step forward. "Please forgive me. I can change. I know I was wrong." She reached out a trembling hand, as if grabbing for something that could pull her back from the edge. I did not move. I was no longer the woman who stood bowed under her insults at the funeral. I was Evelyn Carter, founder of the empire she had just set fire to with her own actions. Jasmine choked, her voice shrinking. I just wanted to be respected." "You wanted respect," I said, each word measured, "but you never respected anyone." Jasmine broke into a louder sob, the kind that wasn't grief but consequence. Aaron turned away, cheeks burning with shame. The air around us tightened with the weight of all the lies Jasmine had relied on for so long. She stumbled closer. "Please, Mom, I can fix this. I can." A hand settled gently on my shoulder. I turned and saw Grace beside me, calm and sharp. She looked at Jasmine with the gaze of someone who had seen every sort of downfall. Grace said softly but firmly enough to still the room, "Let her say everything," and the world seemed to hold its breath. The meeting room closed behind us, leaving me, Grace, and Jasmine in a silence thick enough to feel. Jasmine stood trembling, tear-streaked, her fingers digging into the edge of the table as if it was the last thing keeping her upright. No more excuses, no more attitude, no more arrogance. She faced the wreckage of her own actions with nowhere left to hide. Grace watched her with a look I had never seen before, a blend of stern judgment and deep, quiet empathy. She stepped forward, her breath steadying as if gathering the memory she was about to share. "Jasmine, look at me." Her voice was calm but sharp, forcing Jasmine's eyes up. "I used to be exactly like you," Grace said, each word hitting like a soft but undeniable strike. "I used to look down on poor people. I thought power was something you used to step on others. I once humiliated an older woman because I believed she was beneath me the same way you treated Evelyn. Jasmine stared, disbelief widening her eyes. Grace continued, her voice dropping lower. And that same woman, Evelyn, is the one who pulled me out of the pit I dug for myself. She didn't fire me, didn't scream at me, didn't punish me the way I deserved. She gave me one chance, just one, and it took me years to understand the weight of that gift. I watched Jasmine crumble. Her tears now carried humiliation and shame, but also something else, true realization. For the first time, the mask she wore so long had cracked completely. "Why?" Jasmine whispered. "Why are you still talking to me? After everything?" I stepped closer, stopping just a breath away. "Because I already lost a good husband," I said. "I refuse to lose my humanity too." Jasmine shut her eyes, shoulders trembling. "I didn't know I was this horrible." "You knew," I replied. "You just didn't think you'd ever pay for it." The air grew heavier, every sound swallowed by the gravity of the moment. I rested a hand on the table and looked directly into her eyes. When you learn to respect the poor, when you can treat people kindly without expecting anything, come find me. Jasmine opened her eyes again, and in them was a mixture of fear, hope, and the painful awareness of standing at the edge of a life she destroyed with her own hands. "That's," her voice cracked, "that's the only condition." I nodded. "I won't give you a job. I won't give you money. I won't open doors for you. I will give you one thing only, an opportunity to relearn what it means to be a decent human being." A tear fell onto the floor, echoing faintly in the quiet room. For the first time since I met her, Jasmine didn't argue, didn't justify herself, didn't blame her upbringing, environment, or stress. She just stood there crying silently, as if finally accepting what she had become. Grace stepped back, leaving space between us, her expression resolute. She knew I did not seek revenge, but I would never shield cruelty. I, Jasmine, forced out, "I'll try. I want to change. But is it too late?" I held her gaze. Like Grace years ago, Jasmine was at a crossroads, only she could choose between. "Too late or not," I said, "depends on your intention. The only people who are truly lost are the ones who refuse to face themselves. If you take even one step toward humility, then there's still a path for you." Jasmine clung to her handbag, fingers digging into the straps. She looked at Grace, searching for confirmation. "You really were like me," she whispered. Grace nodded gently. "If Evelyn hadn't believed in me, I'd be where you are today." That broke Jasmine completely. She cried harder, the kind of cry that strips the soul bare. She walked toward the door, paused at the threshold, and looked back at me through swollen eyes. "I'll come back," she said softly, "when I deserve to." Then she left. The door closed behind her with a slow, final click, carrying away the sound of her unsteady footsteps. Grace exhaled deeply beside me, her gaze still fixed on the doorway. "Do you think she'll change?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. The curtain swayed lightly as a draft slid through the crack, as if the room itself was waiting for my thoughts to settle. Inside me rose a question neither of us could answer yet, hovering between doubt and hope. A question about Jasmine's future. A question I could not silence. Will Jasmine rise and rebuild herself, or drown in the darkness she created? That morning, I woke up to a quietness I hadn't felt in months. Sunlight slipped through the window, laying a soft golden layer across the wooden table where I used to sit with my husband writing our last letters together. There were no more arguments from Jasmine, no more cutting remarks slicing into my chest. Only a slow, gentle calm, like the breath of someone finally stepping out of the storm. Aaron came around noon. My son stood tall, his face tired, but clearer than the day Jasmine was exposed. He closed the door softly, set a folder on the table, and looked at me as if he had just made the hardest decision of his life. "Mom," he said, voice low, "I filed for divorce." I didn't speak right away. I looked at my son, really looked, seeing the regret, the awakening, and the quiet heartbreak in his eyes. He sat down, hands clasped, as if bracing himself for whatever weight remained. "I want to start over," Aaron continued, taking a deep breath. "I want to follow what you asked, start at the bottom, as a sales associate." I nodded, feeling something inside me settle. Take the smallest step first. That's the best way to discover who you truly are. Aaron lowered his head, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry for choosing Jasmine's side, especially when you were hurting the most." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Knowing you were wrong and choosing to change, that's what matters." We hugged. It was the kind of embrace between two hearts that had finally found their way back after being torn apart. Later in the afternoon, I returned alone to the small room where Jonathan's portrait rested. My husband's gentle smile was exactly as I remembered, as if he were still watching me from somewhere just beyond the light. The late sun cast a warm glow over the frame, and his eyes seemed brighter than ever. I placed my hand on the cool glass, feeling my throat tighten. "You see that, Jonathan?" I whispered. I stood up, and I won. 42 years of marriage rushed back like a warm tide, smoothing over the wounds Jasmine had torn open. I knew he'd be proud. He always said I was stronger than I believed, and today I finally understood what he meant. When night settled in, my phone buzzed. A name I never expected to see again appeared on the screen. Jasmine. I hesitated for a long second before opening the message. There was only one line, but it stopped me in place. "Thank you for letting the lesson break me, but not kill me." There was no pleading, no blame, no excuses. Just an honest collapse, a late breath of clarity, and something that resembled gratitude from the bottom of the pit she'd fallen into. I sat quietly, letting the words sink in. Jasmine had paid dearly for her pride, but she wasn't destroyed. She was alive, forced to face herself without the mask she clung to. She still had the chance to learn how to be human. She still had a road to walk. I set the phone down and exhaled, feeling the anger inside me dissipate. Everyone has to walk their own path, and Jasmine had finally stepped out of her delusion, whether she liked it or not. No one could predict how much she would truly change, but she was out of our lives, and that alone was a blessing. Outside the window, the passing cars carried the soft rhythm of an ordinary, peaceful day. For the first time, I felt my family was free from the storm Jasmine had created. Aaron was rebuilding. I was standing tall again. And Jonathan, though gone, felt closer than ever. The day ended, but my life opened into a new chapter. A brighter, calmer, more rightful chapter for everything I had endured. In that moment, I knew I had truly won. Not with money, not with power, but with dignity, integrity, and the quiet strength that carried me through every wound. As I closed the door, the night breeze brushed against my shoulder, carrying with it a feeling as if Jonathan were gently placing his hand on my back, steady and reassuring. I understood then that this journey was never about forcing anyone to kneel, but about reminding lost souls that cruelty has never been a measure of worth. In the end, I smiled. Not because I had defeated anyone, but because I had remained myself through wounds sharp enough to tear a heart apart. True peace comes when we're strong enough not to seek revenge, bright enough not to hold hatred, and kind enough to keep walking without looking back at the shadows behind us. That night, I realized something simple. In this life, the ones with beautiful hearts are the ones who truly win in the end.